What is up, Wizards fans? Welcome into the Department of Hope's pregame show. We're going to be talking about the Wizards game tonight, starting the NBA Cup against the Atlanta Hawks. But first, we're brought to you by Stateside Vodka and their Surfside Hard Iced Teas, Hard Lemonades. It's Friday. You deserve a couple of them right now. So go out and find a six-pack of them or whatever and just have a good old time with yourself and others and friends, whoever. If you're going to watch the Wizards game, they make a perfect complement. Also brought to you by BetOnline. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the betting odds and props for tonight's game a little bit later here in the episode, but BetOnline is a perfect place to make those bets. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. You get the earliest odds and have live in-game betting if you want to do that. It provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, MMA. You can head to BetOnline today and get in the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, so I mentioned it up front. The Wizards take on the Atlanta Hawks tonight. This will be their third matchup of the season. The Wizards won the first two. The immediate question is, can the Wizards win 3 games in a row against one opponent? It's the only 2 wins of the season for the Wizards. This time, Atlanta is a little healthier, so that complicates things. The Wizards are 2-8, coming off a 6-game losing streak. Their last 2 wins were against the Hawks, as I mentioned. The Hawks are 5-7, and they're coming off a big win against Boston. They broke a 2-game losing skid, beating Boston 117-116. So a really tight game. They pummeled Boston in the paint 68-32. And I would say that's one of the, general weaknesses of this Wizards team is just keeping guys from getting easy baskets around the basket. So it's going to be imperative for them to keep one Trae Young out of the lane and stop drop down, sort of dump downs and lobs and things like that to Capella and Jalen Johnson and all these other guys that want to get to the rim here as well. So we'll get into it a little bit more as we go here. I just want to say, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you're watching this. It's really important for us to kind of keep growing the channel. Wanted to get this thing over to 1,000 subscribers here as soon as we can, and also hit that like button for us if you're watching on YouTube. I know it's annoying that you hear that every podcast you do, but it really does make a difference. And doing these things for free essentially. So if you could do that one thing in return for the content, we very much appreciate it. So let's get back into the game here a little bit. 7:30 p.m. tonight, Friday. That's November 15th. If you're not cued in on what the date is, I guess. I don't know. It's always good to repeat those things up front, I think. But 7:30 start. So it'll be an interesting one. We'll get to watch the games with these sort of ugly courts. I think they're ugly. I don't know. But I guess it's different. Last year, you saw some of the NBA Cup stuff. Juice up teams like the Indiana Pacers. Can the Wizards get a little excitement building, with this whole thing here? We'll see. The Hawks are the prohibitive favorite in this game here tonight. They're 8.5-point favorites. So we'll see. And the over-under for this game is 237.5. DJ and I the other night were all over taking the over on the over-under there. I think you got to do it here again tonight. That just seems to be the move with the Wizards. I think at this point in time and where they are with the season, like the defense is only going to be more of a struggle for them as the season goes on. So, I think it's just a smart move to keep taking the over. This seems to be a team that's going to give up a lot of points. They're bottom 5 in defense. It's just it's a smart money proposition in my opinion. So just keep rolling with that. Got DJ here in the chat saying definitely take the over. I wholeheartedly agree with him. So we'll see. Also asking where our mascot Arlo is here. He is asleep to the side of me. Just not really his hours. He likes to be crazy and wild during the postgame podcast. So we'll save the big cat energy for Jordan Poole out there. He is coming off a night where he just absolutely torched the Spurs. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough to equal out or even out what Victor Wembanyama did for San Antonio. So we'll see if we can get another Jordan Poole heat check game here going again. That's really the biggest thing for them is just get consistent offense. They have not gotten much consistency from Kyle Kuzma. So it's a big thing for them to keep getting a steady. Honestly, they probably need 30 points efficiently from Jordan Poole again to have a chance in this game. I think we're probably in for a big Trae Young game tonight. Byron Man 12 said, is Trae Young playing tonight? Everything I've seen thus far says yes. He is not listed as out for this game at this moment, and they have not listed him as questionable for this game. So, we'll see what that looks like. Dyson Daniels had 28 points and 6 steals, according to Joe Swam in the chat here against Boston. That's pretty darn good for a guy that was a big fan favorite amongst Wizards fans in the draft a couple years ago. Ultimately went a few picks ahead of them to New Orleans, but really seems to be coming into his own. It's a guy I liked a lot when I got to see him in person against the Capital City Go-Go while he was playing for the G League Ignite. And, that's the kind of like multi-year leap you want to see young players like that take. The Wizards' own young player, Bilal Coulibaly, has made a jump this season. I think there are just certain nights, though, where, he has to be more assertive, especially when you have a Kyle Kuzma back who is seemingly in shot hunting mode for the most part. If I'm Coulibaly, I'm taking the ball, I'm getting it off the rim and taking it up the court myself and just calling my own number a few times. I don't think his other young teammates will blame him. So it's just one of those things where like you need to see him be more aggressive, and it's a two-way street. You need the vets to look for him and things like that too. But there's only 10 guys on the court, and at some point you got to be the one to kind of like be assertive and push the envelope here a little bit for yourself. I know that's not really in Coulibaly's nature. He is a sort of team-oriented, high basketball, high feel guy, but sometimes part of high feel is saying like, all right, these guys are doing dumb shit. I got to kind of take the ball and do it myself here a little bit, because whatever I do, is this going to be a better, smarter way to go about it for this particular team? So that's sort of the main theme here in the chat thus far is no deferring to Kuz. Zebo asked, what's my take on Kuzma? It's weird, man. It looks bad. I don't know. I really wish I could diagnose like what the thought process is here. And I thought the nice thing about last year, them not trading him, is it did seem like they had a good dialogue with him. They supposedly were very transparent about whether or not they were actively going to trade him or not, and took his feedback to heart. And you would hope that that's a two-way street. I would hope that Brian Keefe and Will Dawkins and all these guys can go to him and just say, like, Kuz, what are you doing, man? Like, we can't have you, be the one out there just like heaving every time you touch the ball. And he's got way too many Alexei Petrov, I get bucket son award for shot chuckers, so far this season. We need him to go out and have a, 7 for 12 kind of night where he's 2 of 5 from the 3-point line, has 7 or 8 rebounds, 3 or 4 assists to steal a block, and, maybe 2 turnovers. You can't go, 6 for 19 with 4 turnovers and 3 rebounds and no assists. Like that doesn't do this team any good. It doesn't do your trade value any good. So whether he's just over it or not here, I don't know. Like, I wish you could just sort of get that sense. Like, I think he personally likes being in a place where there seems to be no accountability for doing, just low basketball IQ, low shot selection IQ kind of stuff out on the court. And no one seems to be holding him in check. He did sort of essentially get benched down the stretch the other night. Maybe that's a wake-up call. I'd like to see sort of what Brian Keefe tried to do, with Jordan Poole and say, hey, you know what, maybe you're better suited on the bench right now. And that didn't seem to sit particularly well with Poole, though to his credit, he didn't make a big fuss about it. He just sort of said like, like I'll play where they need me to play. Although like he was diplomatic about it, but you could tell he didn't like the move. And you don't want guys that like those sorts of things. But sometimes guys of any level need a reality check. What's he going to do? Mutiny and not play? Like it's just, you've got to start to establish, I hate the word culture, but that's what it is. Like that can't fly here. And the young guys can't see that flies here. And if they do see someone doing it, there need to be repercussions for someone just going up and heaving the ball at the rim and doing crazy shit. And then that guy needs to get out of town. It is what it is. We're at that point here. And one of the questions in the chat from Byron Man 12 again is, can we still get a first round pick for Kuzma? I think his value is really tanked. NBA teams are not as reactive as basketball fans. It's just one of those things where, him in a 6 or 7 game sample size isn't as meaningful to them as it is to all of us. Like we treat whatever we've seen most recently as the end all be all for what a player is, what their value is. I think any reasonable team is saying, all right, the situation in Washington is weird. If that guy were here in our system doing our things, what would he look like? And how does that translate? The fact that he does, to me, look a little out of shape compared to previous seasons is probably a thing that won't appeal to certain teams, but other teams will look at and say, well, if we can get him into shape here and he gets back to form, like maybe we can buy low here, or get a little, a couple cents off the dollar or whatever for what his value would have been last year. So I do think they'll get a first round pick for him. But what I think that also means is, you're probably taking some bad salary back too. And they can afford to do that given where they are with respect to a rebuild, but it's just going to be one of those things where like don't be surprised if it's not like this lucrative offer, but they should be able to get a first round pick, maybe a younger buy low guy with a little bit of upside still, but somebody with a hefty price tag that evens out what they're going to have to take on with Kuzma. So I think that's a big factor for this Wizards team. Both meetings of these two teams playing together, they did hit the over in points. So again, I expect this to be a high scoring affair. And the Hawks have surpassed 115 points in 3 of their last 4 games. So seems like a pretty safe bet, especially with the Wizards scoring 130 here the other night. Atlanta averages 116 points per game on 47% shooting from the field, but they allow 121 points on 47% shooting from the field. So they're not going to play a ton of defense either. They want to get up and down. These are probably 2 of the higher paced teams in the league. The Hawks are the 8th highest scoring team, and they shoot really well from 3. And I don't think the Wizards have particularly defended the 3-point line well this year. There's a lot of lapses on the perimeter. So this is a smart choice to take the points over here, in my opinion. From the Wizards' perspective, they just have to be better defensively. They have to stop Atlanta from getting into the rim, getting to the rim and getting into the paint. And if you're Bilal Coulibaly, like you got to be the game 1 version of Coulibaly and lock down Trae Young. Like, especially if there are going to be games where he's not as involved offensively, he can't let that get to him. He's got to be as locked in defensively as possible. And you need guys like him that seem to take pride in the defensive end. I think the young guys have mostly done that. Like, they're just not ready to like truly lock down, some of these dudes that they're matched up with against here. So we'll see what that looks like. Joe Swam also said in the chat, glass half full, as bad as Kuz's looked. Pools look pretty good to me. I think that's a big thing. There were a couple random games from what I could tell while I was away that maybe he went off the rails a little bit here, and you need him to be like the locked in Jordan Poole from the Spurs game here tonight for them to have a chance. So we'll really see what that looks like. I'm excited about this. I think the Jalen Johnson matchup would be more interesting, honestly, if there wasn't a Kyle Kuzma in there, because I'd like to see how someone like a Keyshawn George responds to that particular matchup and taking that on. If you're assuming Coulibaly is going to guard Trae Young for most of the night, that would have left someone like George to take on Johnson. And realistically, now it's going to be Kuzma. And I've not been a particularly big fan of the defense he's played so far this season, nor probably has anybody else. So interested to see what they do with the lineup combinations. To me, this is another game where it makes sense to start Sarr as the only big and hope he can rotate and protect the rim, and you can just get up and down the court and keep pace with them. Trying to put Valanciunas in and slow things down works to me more as a change of pace thing, and I think he's better suited to go at someone like a Kongwu off the bench. The Hawks are without Bogdan Bogdanovic tonight, but does look like pretty much everybody else is supposed to play. I'm sure as soon as I, press send on this across all the different platforms and people start to listen to it, they'll send some update that, half their team is magically out or something that makes this irrelevant. But that's kind of the nature of doing these things a couple hours earlier than normal. So I appreciate everybody for checking in here. Hopefully we see some fun things. I'm just looking for like them to stay competitive here against the team like this. And like mentally, I think there's something to that. When you've beaten a team twice, like you should come in with a little swagger of like, we own these dudes. And I want them to play like that instead of we beat them twice. Let's take this lightly. Because if you're Atlanta, they're a team that probably looks at this and says, like, maybe we could get hot and be last year's Pacers and win an NBA Cup or something like that and get a little momentum going. 5-7 is kind of a lukewarm start, but it's good enough to have them be competitive in the Eastern Conference right now. So a win against the Wizards, it helps them out. Right now, the Pacers and Knicks are 4th and 5th in the East, respectively, at 5 and 6. So if you're the Hawks and you win this game, like it gets you right back up into the middle of the Eastern Conference. They're currently in 7th place, but they're tied with the Bulls and Nets at 5 and 7 each. So, a loss here kind of puts them at the back end of the playoff picture. And again, there's a ton of basketball left to play this season, but a win puts them right in the middle in the thick of things. So if you're Atlanta, you have actual stakes here. If you're the Wizards, just be competitive. You're 2-8. The 76ers somehow are 2-9. They'll improve. Toronto looks like their biggest competition in the East right now for worst team here. At 2-10, they've lost 5 in a row. Like Milwaukee is 12th place at 4-8, but they've won 2 in a row. They're going to get it together. They're going to be more competitive. Charlotte is 4-7. Detroit is 5-8. So they're both just like a little bit better. They've got probably too much talent on their rosters right now to like fully out tank the Wizards. So if you're Washington, it's you and Toronto, and that's your stakes, right? Like as a franchise, you wanna actually make sure you're getting Cooper Flagg, who looked, largely really good the other night against Kentucky. I finally got to finish like a thorough breakdown of that game, and there's just some very interesting things there, like him driving left effectively as he drives right. Like he needs to be a more consistent 3-point shooter. Form is still a little wonky, but I think for him it's more about just like taking a balanced shot. So that's probably something that they'll continue to work on over time. But he does a lot of special things, affected the ball on both, or affected the game on both ends of the court. So if you're the Wizards, and I think almost every team in the league had a scout at that game, you're probably salivating at the moment. And I would be playing as many young guys as possible. And as sad as it sounds, that's become the main value that Kyle Kuzma provides you right now is as the ultimate tank commander. And it's sad to say that anyone who listens to the show knows that that was one of my favorite players to watch in a Wizards uniform in a very long time. When he first came over, I was like, this is exciting, and he's doing all these cool things. So we need him to get back to that, and hopefully he's playing his way into form here a little bit. So we'll see. Appreciate everybody checking in on this one. There will not be a post-game show tonight. I'm going to the Maryland game. I want to scout another player that could potentially be in the Wizards realm if he continues the level of play he's at, and that's Maryland's Derek Queen. Went for 22 and 20 in his first game as a college player. Probably not a guy that plays his way into that top half of the draft lottery, but could he be, mid first round pick? If the Wizards make a trade for some of these veterans, they may find themselves drafting later in the game here. And there's a large segment of the Wizards fan base that seems to just want another like low post banger. And that's something that Queen can do. He's got a lot of like footwork and touch around the rim. And he's also like a really good passer. And I think that's the sort of like underrated thing about all the guys that this front office has drafted is they're not afraid to move the ball. The ball doesn't always stick with them. So Queen is another guy that can kind of help you, continue to move that ball a little bit. And I think he does have enough touch here that he'll eventually shoot. He is not a rim protector at this point, kind of ground bound, but putting him with someone like Sarr, maybe he can do the dirty work, banging, rebounding stuff, scoring around the rim, that sort of thing. And Sarr can be the guy to, help supplement that as a weak side shot blocker and whatnot. So interesting. Want to keep an eye on him as the season goes on. And also as a Maryland alum, I'm just excited to see them play Marquette tonight. So no post game, but that's okay. Lock in with us for the rest of the season here, and we'll get you more of these as we go. Appreciate y'all. Jim is also asking in the chat, what do we think of Flagg's potential as a scorer? I think he's really underrated as a scorer right now, based on what he's seen. Yeah, I agree, right? Like the shooting has to be more consistent over time, but I think for most teams, you're probably going to have to put a power forward on him, and him as a straight line driver, he's going to be really hard. He can go either side over either shoulder. And that's just, it's tough to match up with. Like you need a wing to guard him from a quickness and athleticism standpoint, but they're probably too small. He's going to be able to shoot over people. And then most, bigs or forwards, he's going to be too quick and too springy for. So he's a mismatch nightmare. And I think the ball skills will only develop. He got a little loose with the handle. You saw that when really pressured late in that game against Kentucky with the 2 turnovers. But over time, I think the fact that this isn't, a reclassed freshman is just kind of crazy to see him doing that against what I think is obviously like a really good Kentucky team. So he's only going to get better. He was the best player on the floor in that game. So, man, just give him by the end of the season. I think that's a guy that's going to separate himself from the rest of the field because he just impacts the game in so many ways, and especially as a scorer, like Jim mentioned. But he's also smart. He makes the right pass. He draws a lot of attention. The 2-man game with him and Con Knipple is interesting. They clearly have some chemistry there too. And he's a willing passer if somebody has a better look than him. But he's also got enough of that kind of FU mentality, just like, I'm going to put my head down and drive. A couple times you saw him call for screens so that he could get a switch on someone like Kobe Brea, who's not a particularly good defender. And just him being like, all right, I'm going to take this guy's lunch is just kind of the mentality you want. And I think he has that sort of vibe that this Wizards front office would go crazy for. So to me, he's the perfect fit for this Wizards team. If you do think someone's better, you obviously don't draft for fit, but I think if he's the most talented and a perfect fit, that's just what you dream about. So we'll see how it works out. Like DJ says here in the chat, everyone hit that like and subscribe button for us. We really appreciate that, everybody. Thanks for checking this out. We were brought to you by betonline.ag. Go Wizards, and we will talk to y'all later.